invisibility? Oh yes, my fellow Tarnished, and welcome to a collection of 5 Ashes of War that you might not well be aware of, or even if you are, maybe you've not given them too much of a thought, and I would urge you to reconsider. This is my 5, I would say, sleeper hits that I think are actually ridiculously good, and can be made even ridiculouser gooder, and yet nobody seems to be using them. So I want this to be an eye-opening experience. First up then, let's tackle power and get the one that you're maybe most familiar with out the way. This is Eruption. You can put it on big swords, big axes, big hammers, and essentially you slam down into the ground doing a hit on the way down, and then explode it back upwards for a second hit, and then create a pool of lava for your enemies to melt down into. It's a double whammy with extra at the end that does a, well, colossal amount of damage, very much in line with the types of weapons you want to be using this on. But you might be looking at it going, okay, yeah, it's fun, it's cool, but why is it so particularly good? Well, the key is that this Ash of War leans towards strength weapons. It also has components of physical damage, but obviously, naturally, components of fire damage. And when something is doing both fire and physical, well, the bottom line is, you can buff the ever-living hell out of it. Let's just take Flame Grant Me Strength. That is 20% more physical damage and 20% more fire damage while it's on you. For this particular Ash of War, for someone who's going full Unga Bunga strength for life, well, that's plus 40% damage. You get to double dip using the full potential. You get to have Shard of Alexander for an extra bunch of damage, but also the Fire Scorpion Charm for an extra bunch of damage. You see what I'm saying? You can stack so much on top of specifically these melee plus flame Ash of Wars, and Eruption is the best of the bunch. Granted, there's only like 3, but still. This results, as you're seeing, in some colossal hits from some colossal axes. Take the highest scaling strength hammer, well, weapon in general in the game, give it this, give it that fire damage, give a build around it with just, you know, the right statage and some buffs, and hell, even Wondrous Physic with plus 20% damage from the flame tier, and you start absolutely cruising your way through your enemies. It's also hilarious in PvP, because it's not the hardest thing to land. It's got a bit of hyper armor when you first start, and no one can trade with this because it's ridiculous. The extra magma zone control also helps too. I really love it, and I think there needs to be more exploration in general to fire as a source of damage, just because of how buffable it actually is. And you buy this one, and indeed our next one, both from War Master Bernal in the Volcano Manor. Whether he's there or not, it doesn't matter, his chair remains a shop, and you can grab them from it. The Eruption one he adds to his stock once he gets to Volcano Manor, which is why it might not be there for you when you get to him in the War Master's shack. Next up then, well, the other one from him, Assassin's Gambit. This is another ridiculously potent Ash of War that I think, again, needs a lot more exploration, because, I mean, bottom line, it makes you invisible, and not just to AI enemies, but also to players. You have to get so close to another player before they can not even just target you again, but purely see you. I mean, you can imagine the surprise attack potential with just an out-of-nowhere incantation or spell or Ash of War or long-range attack. Imagine bow sniping people while this is on. It would be absolutely hilarious. But of course, it still has its PvE implications and applications too. It massively reduces the range at which enemies will see you and target you, which obviously lets you get really close to field bosses and such, set up, and then blast away. You have to be way less careful, all for the cost of a tiny amount of health. It's just fantastic fun, and is really tangibly a benefit in PvP, and really enhances, let's call them the cheese strats, in PvE.
That's it, cheese. We'll go somewhere where there's cheese.
So yeah, Assassin's Gambit is very, very much satisfying. And I will leave it to your wicked imagination what brutal surprises you can launch on players from a position of essentially complete safety in the shadows. Next up, well, let's cover being invincible. Oh yes, first of all we'll do the location. It's from Leonia of the Lakes, down in the south, in the cave near the village of the Albaneriacs, and it's just a little walk on to the poisony swamp area from a beetle, and we find ourselves with the beautiful Vow of the Indomitable. If you want to know what this does, how's this for you? Press the button, for a couple seconds, you're invincible. That's literally it. It's like a super enhanced dodge roll if you were, but of course it's on demand and doesn't really require much timing because the window's massive and the applications are huge. Obviously you can see in PvE you can dodge massive boss hits, you can wait for their signature moves to come crashing down and effortlessly evade them. Yeah, that's all good, but imagine PvP. Imagine enemies running at you doing their best Melania cosplay, and you're just like, no, I'll just not take damage to that, thank you. And then they're vulnerable, locked in an animation, and you can hit them. How awesome is that? And of course, you can just spam it over and over and over and over, and there's a bit of downtime between, of course, where you can be hit. But with enough FP to sustain this, and a good bit of use, this is really, really cool. Is it better than Bloodhound's Step? Perhaps not in a vacuum, though standing perfectly still and then being able to counter as opposed to Bloodhounds, which forces you to move, definitely does have its advantages in certain situations, but I just think it's absolutely badass as an Ash of War that just gives you on-demand complete immortality, invulnerability whenever you need it. It's amazingly useful, and I hope you find it very, very good. The next two are a bit more wildcardy. We're going to start with Cragblade. This is a general Radahn special where you plunge your weapon into the earth and it comes back up covered in rocks. You get it from Caelid near the impassable Great Bridge. Just a little bit away from the Grace there is a scarab beetle hiding up on the cliffs near the swords, and he will grant you it. What this does on a weapon is enhance strength scaling by 30%. So if you put it on with heavy, well then you get 30% more damage while it's on. That's obviously a massive boost, but it also gives you massively more poise damage. So you might think, yeah, whack this on an already dirty great big weapon and then start critting, knocking people down left and right, and of course you can do that, but the advantage here is it can go on any weapon, which means you can take something really light like this cane sword, and then suddenly make it into a poise-breaking machine. I mean, I say machine, it takes the hits to bring down a giant from like 20 to 10, but that's still half, right? So if you tool this correctly, you can have a really fast light weapon that's also doing massive stagger damage because it's covered in Cragblade in a sort of more light strength focused build, which I think is really cool that this kind of unlocks that, because obviously normally your strength builds are big, heavy, slow weapons, but a fast weapon with Cragblade might be that secret sauce to do something a bit more agile, and that's really awesome. Finally then, very, very wild card, just a Ash of War that I just think's hilarious and I love it. Shout at people until they die. This is Beast Roar. You get it from the Beast Sanctum from Gorank the Clergyman after you give him 4 Death Roots. If you want to know all the Death Root rewards and where to get every single one, we do have a guide on that and I will link it down below. But once you give him 4, you will get this Ashes of War. Or should I say, Ashes of Raw? Look, I'm not sorry, okay? This is really fun. Obviously, it's completely unbuffed on a +0 weapon here, and it does huge stagger damage, and it's really spammable, really fast, really long range. It's just great. When you actually sort of build towards it a little bit, upgrade the weapon, put on a few talismans, you start to get some really impressive results. A spammable 600 to 800 blast of air is really fun, considering how fast you can get them off and the range they go at. And again, in PvP, it's really amusing to just yell at people until they die. I'm convinced there's a build in here somewhere, and I would love you guys to actually let us know if you would like us to take the raw Ashes of War and make them, well, as good as they can be, because there's a surprising amount of ways to buff these abilities across all of the equipment in Elden Ring. But I just think this is really good. It's really cheap, it's got a lot of utility, it's really helpful to give anyone a kind of sniping option when otherwise their build might not allow for it. Even if you just pull out a backup weapon to yell at people before going back to your main actual source of damage, it's really quite neat and really quite useful and adds a lot of utility to you. So, there you go, everybody. That is 5 Ashes of War that perhaps outside of the starter one are a little bit different, a little bit more outside of the norm, but all of them have their place, can be very potent, and I really want you to be aware of them. I hope you have indeed enjoyed this. Like and hit the bell, subscribe for more Elden Ring tips, tricks, guides, funny bits, builds, all of that good stuff. Please consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a good boy.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.